Welcome back, everyone, to the second episode of the Embrace Your Essence podcast. My name's Dustin Drake. I wanted to formally introduce Joe and myself. We got a little feedback after the first episode, after we'd already recorded the second one. So I'm throwing this in here really quick to those who don't know who we both are, and then we'll start doing that consistently at the start of the future podcasts and obviously all the guests we're going to have on as well. My name is Dustin Drake. I am a spiritual life coach in Newport Beach, California. So I've lived an interesting life with ups and downs, as we all have, and it became my passion to learn through health struggles, mental, emotional lows in my past. And so now I've been teaching that for a few years now. And that's my passion. And so I'm always passionate about growing, about developing body, mind, soul, everything. And so in my personal development journey, I met Joe Nix. He's a great friend of mine. He's in Colorado, based out of Denver. He's a spiritual life coach. He's also a real estate agent and an investor as well. So we met in our own journeys at a retreat a little over a year ago and started dabbling on a podcast and finally created it this year. And here we are in our second episode. So we hope you both enjoy, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, night, wherever you are. All right, everyone. So welcome back to the second podcast, the second episode. Got my man Joe Nix here. Dustin Drake. We are just getting going. So much fun. Already got a lot of feedback of the first one, which is like, I love it. We're not sure on our name yet. The logo is random. We got on social media. We're learning how to edit on this platform, totally figuring this out. And one of the big things that meant so much to me is a friend of mine, several, but one in particular, just said how inspired she was. I actually almost teared up when she gave me the feedback, was of how inspiring it was and how rare it is to see two men being this vulnerable, being this authentic with emotions and vulnerability. And that's exactly what we want. That's a huge part of why we're doing this. And I know I'm going to get better and better at just the subtleties of the little masks and nuance I might put on, knowing that I'm in an audience and it's all good. Just even already what I've learned from this process of just opening up about, grief and loss and being very vulnerable and just like right in the middle of it. Just like, screw it. Let's do this podcast right in the middle of it. Already presented a massive amount of learnings, of shifts, of growth in ways that surprised me. So here we are. So this is part 2 of Grief and Loss. You can see we got the Spotify, Grief and Heartbreak, Evolving into Your Best Self. This is part 2.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do a little bit different this time. So Joe's going to start by asking me a question. Then I'm going to ask you a question. We each have 3 questions. We'll see how long the time is, but our goal is to get those 6 questions answered in a reasonable time and being as organic as we can. Just see what happens.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on your end?
No, just mirroring, like what you're saying there. I'm just really excited to be doing this. Really excited to just continue the growth process. I think our friendship has been a really neat opportunity to continue just to inspire, offer opportunities for growth, for reflection, to mirror things back to each other. And it's so much of another piece of our desire in doing this is just to invite other people into that opportunity of mirroring, of authenticity, of vulnerability, of showing up in our life in whatever's happening, and being present with it, being in that moment and experiencing the feelings, as in this case, as painful as they can be, to process, as disrupting to our normal flow in life as they can be. Just the validity behind the human experience, the validity behind the emotional roller coaster that can present itself. And so I'm just really excited to continue discussing that, continue exploring that, and excited to be here. I'd love to jump into this. And so really kind of the first question I had for you was, what has surprised you the most about this grieving process?
Yeah, so several things. One of the massive things is how much this would level me up. That's one of the big things, is in my journey, the ups and downs I've had, the doing spiritual, emotional coaching for a couple of years, or almost 2.5 years, and having a certain level of success. And I hadn't realized how comfortable I'd gotten. I hadn't realized how I'd taken off the gas pedal to my potential. That was one of the most surprising things, was how much this heartbreak, how much this immense pain was going to level me up. I did not see that coming. I've been living my dreams in ways. We've talked about that, certain things that I've manifested where I'm like, subconsciously, it was just like, I got really comfortable. And this just leveled me. I mean, it's like all the discipline I had when I was in the zone, getting up so early, was just performing at my best for about 2 years straight. And I believe that's what led to me manifesting so many things and doing what I'm doing now in coaching. And so that was massively surprising. That was there's a few things. That was a big one. And I'm eternally grateful for that.
Yeah.
Even the things that I teach in coaching, this has leveled me up to embody the principles that I've already learned, but on a way deeper level of like really putting my money where my mouth is, really embodying, practicing what I preach. Just, wow. I didn't see that coming. And that's really landed in the last week. And I'm still seeing it manifest. This podcast is just one example of that. And yeah, I mean, that would be the first thing. Do you have any thoughts or anything on that? Or
no, I think it's just been really neat, and we'll get into this and have gotten into it a piece already, but just the amount of growth opportunity that there is, often hidden in a situation like this, and I think I say hidden more because the initial emotions, the initial experience of grief is so intense and so powerful, and can return. There's not a time schedule on how long the grieving process takes. Obviously there's things that can still spike, but I think it's been beautiful to witness just the growth and kind of transformation that is happening at the same time. That's happening in conjunction with the grief. It's happening while there's mourning going on, while there's pain and suffering. There's also leveling up that's happening. There's also shifting in perspective. There's also been some really neat awarenesses that you've stepped into that I think have surprised us both. And it's been really neat.
Yeah, that makes me think too of another really massive surprise of this all was it's in conjunction with that, and it's the true raw power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
The grief, the heartbreak forced me in ways, I mean, we all can respond differently, but it forced me into taking massive action. And the vulnerability in the post and this podcast and the social media. It's like, especially since we recorded the first one, I've had big integrations of how truly, immensely powerful that is. It's like we're all craving it, and it's one of the most difficult things to do. Now, they say courage is having fear and acting anyways,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the gift, the blessings, the power of vulnerability, that has been another surprise, in the sense that, especially from the Presence Process, the book, I love that book. We were just talking
Yeah.
about it. Where in coaching, this has been my experience, for years now, of the more uncomfortable emotionally, the higher grade fuel you have for growth. It just depends. What are you going to do with the fuel? Are you going to utilize it, or are you going to let it go to waste?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when it comes to vulnerability, it's leveled me up into what I feel is my purpose and calling, and just, God, it's powerful. Like, and that'll lead in, I think, some of the answers to other questions. So I don't want to go too long on that. But I wanted to add that in, and I need to say one last thing is,
Yeah.
you, the power of male friendship in a way I'd never experienced,
Mm.
of how quickly and massively you stepped up.
Mm.
We've only been friends but we've been friends for over a year.
Mm.
I think, 14 months, and fast friends. We've traveled to see each other a lot, and how much you stepped up, that surprised me in ways. But I was not expecting that. And it was so nourishing.
Mm.
The way you just showed up was one of the biggest surprises, and one of the most nourishing elements of this process, especially as a man, because typically us men, when it comes to all this sticky emotional stuff, most men want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And you showed up, man. So thank you. I'm just very grateful for that. So that was I got those three answers in my mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
I received that.
Um,
Appreciate that.
yeah, man. So now I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So right in line. How was it to support me through my grief, like right at the apex of when all this stuff was going down?
Yeah. Great question. I think first I was impacted by your awareness of being in the grieving process, your awareness of stepping into that, and that the void that can be created in an intense emotional situation, grieving, I think, being chief among those, that it can become this place of that you just get caught in a thought loop of grief, of sorrow, of loss, of lack, of isolation. And I think we conversed early on in that, and just being able to see your vulnerability, for you to be authentic and vulnerable enough with me, to show me the pain that was happening inside, to allow me to see that, and allow yourself to ask for support, to need support. I think that's something that's so often missed in this idea we have around chivalry, this idea we have around masculinity or bravery or standing strong in something. Like, this idea that we have to do that alone is ridiculous. And so I think misguided. And I think it was really neat to see an example in another male, while you were going through the situation, to be cognizant of desiring community and desiring to have support, brothership, a friendship around you. And I think that really, called to me, but also just because it's not, I've showed up for a lot of people in my life and had amazing friends show up for me too. But I think it was really neat to see the maturity in you, to be cognizant of what was happening in yourself and ask for it, and show up and actually verbalize that need. I think that was very impressive, I think, to me, but also just a neat example of how we can show up for each other, and the helpfulness and the power behind stating what we need, even if that does feel very vulnerable, very small, very, you know, weak is things like people could label it, and it's just a label. And I think it's very misguided. And so I think it was initially just in that it was really cool, uh, to see your awareness of it, and then be able to show up. Um, and I was grateful to have the time and the flexibility in how I do my work and job to actually schedule time to be able to come out and spend some days, and just do life together during that process and kind of support you through that transition space. And I think it's easy to try to do too much as a friend. And I think often what happens when we see others in an uncomfortable situation, especially emotionally, whether, it's grief or rage or heartbreak, or sadness, I think often what we're programmed to do, is like shift that state for a friend, to try to get in there and change it, make it happy. Let's drink, let's go play golf, let's go buy a sports car, like whatever, like try to change that emotion with some other immense or intense emotion or state. Yeah. And I thought it was a really neat opportunity to just be together and be friends and process what was happening, talk about what you were feeling, like not to belabor or make the thing experience more intense, but just to sit with it and to be with it and to honor the feelings that were coming up and honor the relationship that you had and honor the space that you're stepping into. And like, there's just, and I think it was a neat opportunity for me to just to be there and be side by side and not try to take away or change the situation, but just be support in what was happening and what was real, and in that present moment, and to do that continually, and then I think it was really neat for me as an observer and a friend to be witness to the process of change and kind of the arc of that grief. And obviously there were really intense times of that, but there were also a lot of lightness. There was a lot of brightness that came in very naturally, not out of us trying to change the emotions or situations, just out of actually experiencing it, actually sitting with the emotions that were there, led to many other really neat, I think, awarenesses, awakenings. And it's been and continues to be, I think, fascinating to me to see the growth in you through this. And reflectively, I think there's been some really neat change and growth in me as well. It's just like as a friend and as how you can support somebody and be there and not desiring to take the focus off of them or shift anything, but just actually authentically being there in that uncomfortable space and being whole. I think that was another thing that we reflected a lot on in that. It was just all these feelings and emotions are true. It was incredibly painful. There was a lot of sorrow there. And it was also true that you are still whole and that you are still a complete human, and that there is not something that is detracted from that or taken from that. And so like, it was a really neat, I think, opportunity for me to be there in that space, reflect that wholeness back, and remember that I think of myself as well. And I think those are just initially the things that come to mind.
That's a great answer, man. It's just reminded me of when we went to Joshua Tree and scaled those rocks, like, and just free climbed up to where people were rock climbing.
Yeah.
And we had lunch, I had a deja vu. We talked about wholeness.
That's
and
right. Yeah.
I remember that. We're talking about just life and looking out, and I had a deja vu up there with you, which was so cool. And how organic it was. And I mean, I think I mentioned it last time briefly, but we did eye gazing.
Mhm.
And that was so vulnerable for me
Mhm.
in the midst of my grief as a man with another man
Mm.
to do eye gazing where we're just crying. I don't think you cried, actually. I did.
Mm.
I don't remember you crying. We've done eye gazing where we both have cried for
We both
sure.
definitely cried. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. And that's one of my favorite things about our friendship and
Mm.
about what this podcast stands for is that we embody that.
Mm.
And I like what you said too about it's one of the main values of my life, is feeling as unconditionally as I can. And I didn't run from it. And I faced it and I called in help. And you were one of the main people that came. And it was organic.
Mhm.
And I let it all grow me.
Yeah.
I didn't run from anything. And I didn't force anything away. I didn't push anything. Maybe not anything. I mean, obviously everyone has their moments, but for the far cry, I think you saying that brings that up of how you didn't
Mm.
do what most people do. You showed up in the way that was so appreciated by me because that you're right. Most people just try to manipulate, distract, let's go get a beer. And it's like, no, I believe one of my main reasons on this earth in this life is to grow.
Mm.
So I don't want to run from any of this. So let me embody my beliefs, what I teach, everything to the nth degree right now. And you supported that by how you showed up.
Mm.
Because you were just like, I'm here, dude. You want to go to Joshua Tree? Let's go to Joshua Tree. You want to cry? Let's cry. You want to eye gaze? Let's eye gaze. Like, and so that takes a good friend, man. A lot of people, it's hard for people to do that. I think that credit goes to you because of most people, it's too uncomfortable.
Mm.
And you just were like, here. So
I
I want to give a
appreciate
shout
that.
out to you on that, man. That was, I just, it's so nourishing. It's so beautiful.
I'm very grateful for the models I've had in life of that, and
Whew.
um, and to receive that back. I mean, I think that's a neat thing about stepping into vulnerable, authentic relationship with anyone else is just the opportunity you have to learn when they're learning and to reflect back the celebrations, the joys, um, is just so greatly intensified. Not just in the impact in the moment, but also the number of times that can happen in a relationship that you
Yeah.
continue growing is just greatly increased. I wanted to ask you, kind of during this process, what you felt like has helped you the most in that grieving process.
There's a lot of things.
Hmm.
One of the main things would be what we're talking about, feeling unconditionally, using the discomfort for change and fuel for growth, community, allowing help, letting the ego go, allowing help, letting the ego go, rinse and repeat.
Hmm.
That's huge. To lock in on something though, my routines, and it's a big thing that I teach as
Hmm.
well. I mean, I keep it's also integrated is my routines. So in my relationship, I had allowed it was a lot of effort on routines still very much. I had allowed as I think we all can with change, I allowed things to slip.
Yeah.
And so my and if there's any people that I've worked with that see this too, whatever, people know that I'm all about state shifts and routines, and cold plunge is one of them. And so I had never made it a practice to go first thing in the cold plunge in the morning. It was a part of my routine, but I'd usually do it after I'd work out. So it'd be, you know, anywhere from late morning to early afternoon, depending on my day. And so one of the most amazing things, aside from just the people and the relationships and the community I've called in, is my first thing in the morning. I get up, and I'm going to post again about this today. I'm trying to also get more creative in my social media edits. So I get in the cold plunge, and it's usually around 50 degrees, and I go about 4 to 5 minutes. And starting with that, and I think to bring value to people too, is if you haven't done a cold plunge, Granted, it's super trendy now, and um, especially in grief, especially in times where things are really extra difficult, taking the responsibility and the discipline and the courage to like, I really, whether you wake up with sadness or fear or some anxiety or exhaustion, or this day is so hard to face this day with the amount of pain in my heart right now. And the cold plunge of doing that first thing just snaps me out of that in a sense that my mind gets back to neutral. My state, I feel amazing. And I'm way more effectively able to let the energy and the emotion go through me, and more capable and more equipped to know, my mind, you work for me. My emotions, my heart, you work for me. My thoughts, you work for me. My body, you work for me. I am the ruler of my kingdom. And even though you're all screaming at me, no, stay in bed, don't want to do it, too cold, can't do it, shouldn't do it, bah, 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 I rule my domain. And so I think for anyone who's listening that, man, just to empower yourself is starting your day with a suck. I got that from either David Goggins, Joe Rogan, many people. Facing the suck for just a few minutes, and your whole system consciously and subconsciously is like, whoa, I am way more powerful than I realize. I can achieve so much, and it just sets the tone for the day. So doing that every day first thing is one of the biggest, most effective things. And that has set a new foundation in an elevated way for me for every area of my life. Like the leveling up, going to the gym every day now. I didn't go every day before. So I go to the cold plunge. I go to the gym every day. I'm in the best shape of my life. And that's another cool thing now. And writing my book, right? Like I can go on a bunch of different things, but I think to hone back in on the question is my routines, cold plunge, discipline, facing the difficulty in ways to prove to your subconscious that you are in charge and you can achieve way more than you realize. And that, with opening up to community, have been some of the most impactful things to build on that I've already done in the past, or done with a lot of consistency, and just taking that further or adding in new levels of that where I'm like, okay, I've never done it exactly this way. This is even harder, and it's better. And the confidence and the opportunities and the synchronicities and the connections and the people and the growth, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced, honestly, in my life, which is insanely nourishing. So
Thank you.
yeah. Ooh, that felt good to share. Ooh.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask you, what stood out for you the most? Like, what stood out for you the most in being my friend through this process in the last month?
It's a good question. I guess I'm trying to grab like the most, just because it's in the question. Like, there's been a lot of things that have stood out.
Oh yeah, what stood out for you? Maybe to keep.
I was like, yeah, I don't know.
Only one.
I think it's been really neat to observe the growth and the change and the perspective shifts that you've had. Like, I think there's been a lot of neat, I think, growth on top of trajectories that you had. Like, this is not, you didn't just start engaging in your internal life like this last year. Like, you've been very actively growing, engaged in elevating and empowering yourself and those around you for years. And so I don't want to state anything like that. I've just seen this arc, from from this period. But I think there's been a lot of neat additional growth that's happened through this grieving process that has elevated on you on top of lessons you've already learned, shown you another layer of that, shown you another level of that. And even how I've experienced you, I think, as a person and as a friend. We talked before, there's been some really neat shifts in just kind of an ego death, in a way, in you, and just a connection to pride, I think, in a way that didn't serve you. It was a bit out of the consistency with the other growth in your life, and kind of it stood out to me in different ways before this grieving process had ever happened. We talked about that. I mean, even early in our relationship, we talked about different ways we both show up, kind of in that ego relationship with ourselves. But it's been, I think that may be the most, just because it was also unexpected for me. Like, I didn't, in walking this path with you, being your friend, next to you, like, I didn't have any expectations of like what you should learn through this growth process, or like, hope he's checking these boxes as he's dealing with his intense pain. But I think it's been a really neat observation through it, just the different ways your life has evolved, and become more empowered. But I think a really neat one, as I said, was just that kind of that ego death. And really, I see even more authenticity and even more vulnerability, showing up with you in all spaces, but especially in relationship, especially in how you hear another person, how you speak. And I think that's been a really neat, empowering, a neat leveling up. Because again, like, I think you weren't starting from zero. Like, there has been a lot of work you've done on your life prior to this year, and efforts moving in that direction. But I think that was a really organic manifestation of just seeking what you can do with that fuel, what you can do with that space, and that energetic exchange that is created through a hard or traumatic experience in our lives. And as you said before in your answer, like, we have a choice. We are the kingdom of, or we're in control of our sphere. We're in control of our body, our mind, our emotions, physical and the spiritual. And when there is so much shift, whether that be through a grief process or something else, like, there is so much raw energy, as you spoke of there, that can be turned into all kinds of things. And there's, we've all experienced people who've turned that into scars that they live with and repeat, and bring back up for the rest of their life. Like, that's an option of what to do with that energy. But I think it was really neat to experience you continually trying to turn that energy back into something that that connected with who you are and elevated you and empowered you to be a greater version of yourself than you were before. And I think that's really kind of what comes to me the most, is just that that agency that you stepped into, even in the pain. And that's, I think you spoke to it well with your routines, is choosing to allocate that energy toward things build you up, toward things improve your life and empower you. And that's been meaningful to witness.
Right on, man. Yeah, that's, God, I love talking about this stuff. That is so much fun. Yeah, it's just organically, one thing that came up is how liberating it was from a personal and professional perspective to even be talking about this. Before this, and just even saying this right now, like actually what I'm about to say would have been terrifying before, is oh my gosh, how would a client ever work with me if they know XYZ?
That you're
What
human
I've
too.
that I'm human, exactly. And I think that's one of the things about what I'm loving about
Yeah.
this shift
Yeah.
and this podcast and all the people I've connected with around the world now and the networking I'm doing here in Orange County is like it's already made me a better coach.
Mm.
It's made me a better friend.
Same.
It's made me a better son, brother, lover. And like just
Mm.
all of it. Like it's what a gift. It is so
Mhm.
liberating. Like you're talking about the ego death, and I think it's like it is so humbling in the sense that we're always learning. And how cool that you and I are creating this thing where we're sharing that
Mhm.
vulnerability with people because it's so rare.
Yeah.
And it's just liberating. I don't know how else to say it. Like, and it's even evolving how I'm going to do coaching moving forward. I'm already shifting things. It's inspired me, this catapult thing, this rocket booster of potential, and like just furthering embodying what you and I both resonate on,
Yeah.
coaching, spiritual coaching, personal development. It never stops. And we always have, I love you use the word agency so much, the agency of how are we going to like, oh, okay, I thought it was here. Ooh, this thing happened. Ooh, ooh, how am I going to engage with that? It's way out of my comfort zone of my
Mhm.
norm. Maybe it's been 7 years. Maybe it's been 20 years for someone else. Maybe it's just been a year. I don't know. But how am I going to embrace this? Because I'm here. I can go here. If I don't embrace it, I'll stay here. I'll be comfortable.
Yeah.
My ego will still be intact, but I'm not going to elevate. And that's so that just came up super organic right now
Mm.
of the learnings, the humble lessons in this for me personally and professionally. So, um, I want to ask you. So I think you already answered that. Kind of what stood out and what surprised you the most
Yeah.
was the ego death. So you actually answered that last question.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I don't know if I answered all your
No,
questions.
I was going to ask you too, what you feel like you've,
Yeah.
from the learnings, like what do you feel like you've implemented um, the most during this
Hmm.
process that is like what changes have you made coming out of this? I know maybe that's reflecting back on the routines, but I was interested in just
Yeah.
what's coming up for you about.
Yeah, I mean it is kind of similar now that I'm thinking more about what I've already said. I think I kind of went into that.
Hmm.
I'd like to quickly like a snapshot of just it goes back to the same learning of how do we use the fuel. And so I mean the changes is I think I'm like I want to focus this on whoever's listening right now. The way I can provide the most value in my answer is that principle, how we embody pain, discomfort, and change. And change is constant. Probably a lot of us have heard that, quote, only constant is change. And it's so here's the list, right? This podcast was birthed from this heartbreak and pain. I mean, we were dabbling, but here we are.
Hmm.
I'm networking more than ever. I'm cold plunging first thing in the morning every day. I'm working out every day. I'm in the best shape of my life. I started writing my book. I'm networking with people around the world again. People have reached out from 10 years ago, from 5 years ago, from 15 years ago. I feel more supported than ever. I
Hmm.
feel stronger than ever. I feel more humble than ever. Uh, I'm leveling up. I'm not the same person I was.
Hmm.
And so I think it's thank you, pain. Thank you, source. Thank you, woman I was with,
Yeah.
respect for privacy.
Yeah.
Thank you, grief.
Hmm.
Thank you, opportunity. Thank you, agency.
Hmm.
My ability to choose and
Hmm.
decide how am I going to do this. Thank you for, I mean, I'm grateful for all of this. I really, really am. And And so I think that's my answer
Yeah.
to
Well,
that. Yeah.
This has been neat, man. I appreciate you sharing with that. Again, I just want to express my gratitude for um, your authenticity, your vulnerability, and allowing me as a friend in to see you, to see your heart during this, and just and I'm very inspired and continue to be. Just that this is something we can share with others as well, and we obviously we talked about doing a podcast for a while. We did a bunch last year that we never did anything with or released, just kind of trying to figure things out ourselves and still growing. But I think it was so authentic in how it came up this time, and actually like desiring to share the lessons you're learning right now. And it was so reflective of who we desire to be as people, as coaches, as friends, and allowing people a window, allowing others a window to see ourselves in transition, to see ourselves in state of grief, of pain. And I think that's something we miss as humans. I think we've gotten so caught up in watching that on TV, watching that in movies, watching other people go through things and express that, but we don't do it in community with each other. Or I don't see it a lot. And I'm just grateful to be in a community, to have friends that are willing to do that. Not for fame, not for pride, not to sell a platform or sessions, but to give someone else the opportunity to grow through something we're dealing with, struggling with, hurting from. And just the neat platform that our lives really are, and not just uniquely our lives, every life. And the amazing tapestry that creates for a beautiful realizations, for empowerment. What an amazing platform it creates for us to be there for each other, and to actually provide authentic friendship and love and acceptance. And just grateful to continue in that, and have an opportunity and be in a place internally where we're willing to take that mask off,
You're here.
Take that disguise off and be here.
I love that all. I agree with it all. And I want to add that if I had to chunk up, or NLP term, I've had to zoom out from like a 30,000 foot, view, and look at this episode, or look at what we're all talking about in these, 2 episodes, is we're all craving intimacy. We're all craving love. I think the loneliness statistics are at like a record high. And the way to get there is to have real intimacy. And to have real intimacy, you have to have vulnerability. And so I'm proud of us, and everyone else that has showed up is like, let's create more of that. Like, this is fun, and it's scary, and it's what we're all seeking. So let's do it. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So
I love it, man. Thanks again. Appreciate it, Dustin.
Love you, brother.
Was great.
We'll talk soon.
That sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right, man. See ya.